So welcome everybody. This is Hugh Massie, the CEO and founder of DNA Behavior International. And I am really excited today to lead another one of our identity interviews. And today I've got Drew Plant with me, who is a PR consultant and the CEO of Plant Communications. And I've worked with Drew for the last 4 or 5 years, and he has really helped our business grow, and I know many other businesses grow as well. So welcome, Drew.
Good morning.
So let's get started. So my first question is, just tell me a little bit about your career path and how you've got to the place where you're at now.
Okay. One thing that's a little unusual about my career path is that I not only followed in the footsteps of a parent, my mother also was a longtime PR professional, but I started doing what I do literally in high school and college. I knew that I wanted to work with words and images to help tell stories and get people's messages across. I didn't know exactly what that looked like. Originally, I worked at the local newspaper when I was in college or in high school. And from there, while still in high school, went to a small local PR firm and worked there several years on into college. They closed while I was in college, and I went to work at a quasi-public utility, the Tennessee Valley Authority. Originally as an intern, and then stayed on after that through the rest of undergrad and a little bit after college. And working in that utility, I learned about other organizations in the same industry and was hired by an industry association here in Atlanta. And that's what brought me to Georgia from Tennessee. In retrospect, I'll say it was not a great fit in a lot of ways, but I worked with some terrifically smart people and learned a lot and had some advantages. For instance, they wanted me to go to graduate school and they paid for it. So any what I would say is negative or not good fit is certainly outweighed by some other things. They went through significant downsizing when I'd been there for 5 years. One of the significant things is that I was just coming up on my vesting date, which you'll appreciate being in the financial realm. So my graduate degree was paid for, I was vested, but I was in a hamstrung position because I hadn't yet been paid for that new degree. And I found when I tried to job hunt, basically the answer was, you haven't been paid for it, we're not going to yet. So I decided to use my severance package as sort of a small business loan. And that's the first time I went out on my own. I thought, I'll go out on my own a little bit, I'll pay me for the graduate degree, and then someone else will. So I worked on my own for close to 5 years. And really cast about a little bit, not in a bad way, but just finding what kind of industries I wanted to work with, how to sell myself, how to charge for it. And eventually went to work full-time for one of my clients, who remains a client today. I worked in that industry, a niche life insurance industry, for 5 years. When they went from a business to consumer model to a business to business model, I was sort of burned out, and it didn't appeal to me as much. The people part of the business wasn't going to be there. So I once again thought, well, I'll go out on my own again. When I announced that, the friend and entrepreneur who owns and runs that company said, I don't want you to go. And we reached the compromise that I would go half-time for a year, which seemed perfect. Again, it was a way to launch a business. And as you know, I like to be in my comfort zone. So that was a comfortable spot. That 1 year turned into 2 years, and I kept trying to hire my replacement, and he kept rejecting everyone. So what eventually happened is after the 2 years of being part-time, I went back out on my own, but retained him as a client. And that's where I've been for about 15 years now.
Yeah, so really you love being on your own, being able to chart your own course, have your own clients, not be under the thumb of a large corporate player.
I do. I think it's in some ways the best of both worlds. I still get to work with a lot of smart, creative people, learn new things all the time, even learn new industries. But yes, be a little bit of the captain of my own ship.
So what, Drew, would you say is a pivotal moment, though, in this career journey for you?
There have been several. But honestly, it's been when I get to help a client through a big happening, and that can be a positive thing for them, growth or a launch, or that can be something that otherwise is negatively impacting their business, and I help them navigate that. Those are the times when I have not only felt vital and needed, and very productive, but it's also a good way to look at your own skill sets, both the ones you have and the ones you lack, and sort of decide what are the good parts and bad parts of what we've just been through, and how will that change me and my work going forward.
So what's the working with these big events or helping people navigate these big events? What is it about the big events that excites you, or where you're exceptionally strong at? There's something about it that is powerful.
Yes. Usually it's when people embrace, for whatever reason, sometimes it's because they're in crisis, the core of what I do. And a lot of that means bringing me into the process early enough, because a lot of clients bring me in a little late. So I'm fixing things, or I'm helping message something that's not optimal. It also usually means that they invest trust in me. So they somewhat bare their souls. And that's when I can really help them solve the problems and navigate what they do, because I'm not casting in the wind. I'm not finding out things after the fact. I'm a true partner in helping tell their story and push forward.
So is it the fact that in these big event situations, people have to disclose, they have to disclose more to you? They're almost forced to get a proper outcome, or is it the complexity of the situation and it requires you to be innovative as well is the big driver for you, or the motivator?
It's really both. In those kind of moments, people understand that I'm not going to necessarily tell everything they share with me, but that it helps me innovate, which is exciting for me, if I know everything. So I've got the lay of the land. We've together got the proper foundation to build the messaging, to strategize, and then from that extrapolate what we need to do hour to hour and day to day to tell their story and push past whatever it is, whether that's, getting good news out or getting past bad news.
So what do you see in all of this as your greatest talent, like your standout talent?
I believe it's helping people tell their stories. And a lot of that at times that's helping them understand and mine for what their story usually is. A lot of people come to me and they think they know what the story is they want to tell. And sometimes they're spot on. Sometimes they're a little bit off center on that. Or sometimes we have to mine for the business part of that. For instance, okay, this is your story, but what's the saleable part of it? So the short version is storytelling. The bigger part of that is honing for what the true story is and the best ways to communicate that.
Yeah, so really finding the real story, discovering the real story.
Yes.
And is there any particular technique you have to do that? Is there some unique skill that you have in that area? What enables you to do that better than everybody else, I suppose, is where I'm going.
I think to start with, I intuitively am good at it. And that's sometimes hard for people to accept because that requires some trust on their part, sometimes a little bit of blind trust if they don't know me. From there, it's asking the right questions because there's a lot of readily available information these days about every topic. So we can all go out and find something about it. But the trick to me is asking the right questions and setting aside usually a bulk of the information that we're just not going to deal with or that maybe informs it. The other part that I've become better at with age and I guess experience is listening, not just what they're saying, but what they're not saying and what other people will ask about what they do.
Yeah, so that's pretty interesting. I think I agree with the question asking is really important. And if you can do that part well, it actually makes listening easier, I think. You could just sit back once you've got the right question there.
Definitely.
And that probably needs you to be quite instinctive too in the situation. To come up with the right questions. Right. And to know whether the person's really telling you the truth or is actually, well, sometimes it's not that they want to lie to you, it's just they don't know what the truth is. And right. The question can be very liberating.
Yes.
So if we took this to business DNA, the business DNA discovery process that we have at DNA Behavior, and you know what that is. And just for our listeners, you're an engager style, very open communicator, quite enthusiastic communicator, fairly instinctive, like people. But what is DNA, the business DNA discovery brought home for you in terms of your strengths?
Sorry, I'm looking at my notes.
That's okay.
I cheated in my notes. My first reaction, and I think this is pretty universal for people, is it was a little bit of a eureka moment. This is something I wish I had at the beginning of my career. Because I had great self-awareness about some things and a complete lack of self-awareness about other things. And these are things that a discovery system or just the right person can help you find, but sometimes you can't put that mirror up to yourself. So it, for instance, was great to see creativity and resilience. And I went, yes, I've got those things. It's a little bit harder to see the fact that I can be complacent and stuck and comfortable with the status quo. And serendipitously, when I did the discovery, it's when I was sort of already in a place of thinking about what I needed to change and what I need to work on. So it came at a great time in terms of that reflection.
So the part that was really the standout was it confirmed to you that you're creative and you like thinking out of the box, having brainstorming discussions with people, coming up with different thinking to ask people key questions to get out of them really their story or what needs to be communicated, the message. but I think the part that you're saying was that you might have been blind to was really, which gets down to the content factor, is the fact that you like the world to be the same, potentially,
Yes,
or a stable world. Because I think complacent is sort of the in a way the struggle side of it, but there's also a strength there in liking stability, tranquility. I don't know whether that's something that you like in your life.
yes.
Living in a fairly stable community is important. Making sure you have a balanced lifestyle. You know, their strengths of that style as well.
Yes. In fact, I jokingly tell that one of my nieces says that my husband and I are two of the most boring people she knows. And I not only took it as a compliment, but she actually meant it as a compliment.
So when you take that strength of being content, stable, how does that play out for you as a strength?
One, it means that I can navigate behind the scenes effectively for my clients. I think where it becomes a challenge is to know that without upsetting that calm, I can still get outside the box and stretch and grow and do other things. I think instinctively, I used to think those were mutually exclusive. And at least for me, the longer I live, I realize those are not, that I can have that calm and still reach and grow and stretch for both me and my clients.
Yeah, so I think that's an important aha moment, is to, be able to bring those two together, because being creative doesn't just have to be associated with being chaotic or harebrained. It's more, how do you apply that in a steady way and bring consistency to the clients? Because I think, what I know with you, for us, you've always been extremely reliable. It's consistent, but I also know that I'm going to get out of the box thinking.
Right.
And you can apply your mind to different settings. So in what situations, Drew, do you feel like you are the most confident?
Again, when I have a client who we can engage on a level where there's trust and sharing, so that I'm learning enough about what they do and who they are and where they want to go, that I can help them on that journey. What derails me, and honestly, what derails the process for them and means I'm not going to be my most effective, is that if they try and short circuit the process. So for instance, they come to me and say, I know what my message is. I don't want you to change this message. Just push this message out there. Because especially with really smart entrepreneurs, which tend to be the people I work with, it's sometimes hard for them if I come back and say, that's part of your message, but let's tweak it. Or this is going to be an iterative process. We can't just go boom and it's out there. So working through that. And again, what has come with maturity is realizing that's not an all or nothing. Sometimes it is, and you have to recognize that, and maybe it's not a fit. But most of the time, it's just like we've learned with the DNA discoveries, figuring out how I need to communicate with them, how they're going to hear it and react, and working through that process where we find the comfortable partnership where I'm doing my best work for them and they're getting the best result.
Yeah, because I think I probably would be one of those entrepreneurs who thinks that when they come to the table with you that they've got the message sorted out, but then you've always been good at able to, in either re-expressing something or asking a probing question to get around that. And your open, engaging personality, I think, enables that to happen. you're easy to trust, but I always know that you're going to have a thoughtful question. So I think that's important. So as we take all that forward, what do you see your identity as? Where do you see your greatest impact in the world? That's really what I associate with identity. Is
Right.
Where does Drew Plant think his greatest impact is in the world?
I think it's as a storyteller, and I think the challenge with that is we all tell stories, whether or not you're in PR. We all work with words, we all work with images. So there are some people who can't get past my expertise and talents being different from just my opinion. So part of the job is up to me to convince them of that. But also it gets into all those finite things of farming for what the real story is. Who do we want to tell it to? What's the best way to tell it? What's the long arc at the end of the day? Because you've got to have the strategy as well as all the little nuts and bolts that put it together. And I think telling stories comes more naturally for entrepreneurs and executives, and that's probably why I've found the sweet spot for me working with them. The other thing that keeps me going and keeps the storytelling a passion are what people call side hustles now. And a lot of that's my community work. So I've often worked with disenfranchised communities to help tell their stories. So that has been about for politicians, that has been in the HIV/AIDS community. And currently, right now, for instance, I serve on the board of a nonprofit that works with affordable housing. And it's very gratifying to me to figure out what those stories are and how to tell them.
But do you think you're the storyteller, or that your real gift is asking the right questions in those big event, high impact situations that gets the person to tell their story?
That's a really good point, Hugh. I have a client that describes me as the wizard or the man behind the curtain. And on one hand, he's probably giving me too much of the credit, but it's really about telling other people's stories. And I'm comfortable doing that. I sort of joke sometimes that there are two kinds of PR people. There are the ones who want to jump in front of the camera, and there are the ones who push their client in front of the camera. And that's more a proverbial camera. But I think it's important to remember that it's their story and their moment in front of the camera, and that's the win. And that I, in fact, win when they win in front of the camera and telling their story.
So you used a good word, because I think I got it out of you. Really, in a way, you're the question-asking wizard.
I like that.
And that's really what you can strive towards, right? So that when you're using your talents, and this is partly why we're doing this, is because I want to help you bring together and reinforce, your identity as that wizard that asks great questions,
right?
That probes people to be able to tell their story in that big event, high impact situation, because that's when then you'll know from behind the scenes that you really had an impact.
Exactly. That's well put.
So to me, your identity, and I will remember you now, and I think this will be important for me and other things that we do, is you as the question asking wizard.
I like that. I think you've given me my new moniker.
Yeah, because I think that's something that's very powerful, and I know I trust you in that, because that's just the way that we've worked together, and the way you give us feedback, whether it's with the written work or it's when we've done discussions around play bigger. You've always been able to see a different lens, because you're close enough to us, but you're not in there every day either. So I think that's a important thing, Drew, for your identity. So if we take that, I think that's really good, and it is extremely impactful.
Well, thank you for that.
Then the game is, okay, so if you're the question asking wizard, is how do you make sure you communicate that to all of your existing clients, new clients? That's where you're going to be able to help a lot of people. And with your more engaging style, you're capable of drawing them out. I think there's probably not anybody that you couldn't really draw out, unless they're that closed that they don't want to listen. So I think that's, to me, very exciting. Have you got anything else that you would like to share, in relation to what we discussed, or a tip or an insight that you'd like to give anybody that's going to be listening to this video today?
One is sort of a commercial for the discovery process, and one is sort of a pointer on using good communications counsel. My little commercial for the discovery process is that, and I think a lot of you will probably feel this way, after I did my own discovery, I felt like it was something everybody needed to do. Certainly in a business setting, but even in a personal setting. Short of that, it's helped me think better about where somebody else is coming from. And the analogy or parallel I would share is that the friend and client who I've worked together the longest, it's going on like 28 years now, off and on. One thing I've had to tell other people on his teams, both when I worked for him as a full-time employee and a consultant, is he has a way he thinks through things, and you're not going to short circuit that. And over, I've encountered people who say, I'm smart, I'm tenacious, I'm going to short circuit it. And I've had to say, that's not going to work. He's not going to make a decision early. And he's usually right. He knows himself. So I have to apply that in dealing with other people, because they have their own ways. The other thing that I would say in terms of working with great communications counsel, and it goes back to the questions, is that a lot of times when someone's asking questions and you're the subject matter expert, they can seem naive. So I will sometimes tell people up front, I'm the idiot test. You're the subject matter expert. My job is to learn what you do. So some people will turn off. They'll hear me asking questions and say, that's the wrong question. This guy doesn't understand what I do. When what I want to help them hear is, you are the expert at what you do, and we've got to translate that however it is so other people understand it.
Yep. And you can keep doing that with asking questions to drive it out of them, to bring the clarity.
Yes.
So is there any tip, is there any book that you would like to recommend to people, or a movie or blog or something else that people could benefit from?
One thing I would say is that the Play Bigger book that you introduced me to and we worked with really resonated with me, because it gets to the core of what I do. And that is, people overuse the word branding now, but it really helps people drill down in terms of what is their positioning, what is their brand, and how do they thoughtfully tell that story. Another book that I've read recently that will resonate with you is about Enneagrams. And that was new to me. I knew about Myers-Briggs and some other things, but a client introduced me to Enneagrams, and I thought, well, I'll dive into that because it will help me understand DNA and people. So that's been terrific. The next business book that's on my desk that I'm going to dive into is Atomic Habits.
Okay.
And again, a client introduced me to that, and it resonates with me because doing those small things that help you and your clients evolve is something I need to work on. So there's a win for me because my client's interested in the book, but there's also a personal win.
Yeah, I think it is the little habits, isn't it, that make a difference, and doing them, and then getting the right ones and using and following them consistently.
Yes, and I tend to want to set things aside until I can tackle the whole kit and caboodle, and that's usually just not realistic with a busy life. The other thing I would share is if people have not discovered the website Medium, just like small, medium, large, medium.com, I describe it to people as sort of the new Huffington Post. It's what HuffPo was in the early days. So it's sort of crowdsourced. And that can mean there's some schlock in there. There's some writers who aren't as good, some thoughts that aren't completely thought through. But there's also a lot of good writing across a lot of subjects. So if you're dealing with something personal or in business, it's a good place to just reflect on what other people are saying and writing. And you may not agree with any of it, but it may spark your next great thought.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I'll look forward to looking at that. But medium.com and also Atomic Habits. And I think I would also just reinforce for everybody listening to this to go and get the book Play Bigger. I think lots of us as entrepreneurs particularly think that we've got it sorted out, that what our unique proposition as a business is, where our positioning. But a lot of the time we really haven't. And the more specific you can get about what that is and differentiate it, the better you're going to do. And again, coming back to the question wizard, I think it provides a framework for you to ask questions to really drill in on that, like you did with us in helping DNA Behavior get there on Play Bigger too. It's absolutely critical, but the framework is fantastic. So Drew, I want to thank you for spending time with me today and talking about your identity. I think we covered a lot of ground, and there's a lot of wonderful insights for anyone that wants to be a client of yours. This is going to be fantastic for them to listen to, but you've also helped me a lot as well, and how we'll work better together in the future. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your taking the time and for giving me my new moniker.